Well, good afternoon to you on this Friday. Welcome into this edition of First Alert Weather Extra. Just like I said yesterday, this is going to be a fairly short weather segment because there's not a whole lot going on anywhere in our vicinity. Overall, live look outside shows mostly sunny to at times partly cloudy skies. You can see a little bit more sunshine visible on the DeRidder Skycam, a little more cloud cover here at our South Lake Charles Skycam. But all in all, it is warm no matter where you are. Temperatures currently here as of 5:30, still at 80 degrees, both Fort Polk and DeRidder. We're down to 74 in Lake Charles. They say down. We were up a degree or so last hour, but the humidity is higher than it was yesterday. Dew points have made it into the 60s area-wide after being in the 50s yesterday. That's a sign that it's getting more humid. And remember, once the dew points get into these 60s, that's when you start to notice that being a little bit more humid or a little more uncomfortable feeling. Low 60s isn't bad, but every degree you go up from there definitely becomes more and more noticeable. And I think we will begin to feel that humidity more starting tomorrow. There's the change in dew points. We're up on average about 5 degrees from where we were yesterday. Temperatures aren't as warmer as they were yesterday. A little more noticeable here along I-10 simply because we had a little more cooling effect from the southerly winds off the Gulf. But every day that goes by, you begin to warm the waters up a degree or two here and there, and that cooling effect is less noticeable, and I think it'll become less noticeable with time. But it is worth noting that cooler water is why the temperature at Cameron is lower than everyone else and noticeably cooler than everyone else. That's because of the effect of that water being noticeably lower in temperature. Now, a look at this visible satellite. There you can see some of these low clouds that are around. They're lined up in what we call these streets, cloud streets, if you will. Zoom in a little closer and you can see them a little bit better. Basically, the wind comes in off the Gulf, brings the moisture with that wind. It runs over the land where it's warmer. The air rises and condenses, and you get these little cloud streets that pop up across the area. Now, there may also be some smoke plumes mixed in. Some of these are a little more difficult to discern versus the clouds themselves. But speaking of, we can see that better with the radar. Here's a look at the radar currently, and I see a couple of different smoke plumes visible. This looks to be a new one here on the south end of Lake Arthur, and I'm talking about the body of water. So that's technically in northeastern Cameron Parish. That's out near the Klondike area. You can see looks like a smoke plume here. Now, once you get too zoomed in, unless you're really close to the radar, which we're not here, it's difficult to determine exactly where that's at, but that's out there, as I said, in the Klondike area, and kind of across the Mermentau River from the Lowry community. There's definitely another smoke plume here just north of Grand Chenier. That's up along, it looks like Chenier Purdue Road, or somewhere in that vicinity is where that fire is burning. Most likely these are all controlled or at least planned, prescribed fires. That's usually the case, especially when we're in marsh territory like this. Another one out of our viewing area, but down near White Lake, just around the Pecan Island area. You can see at times it looks like that's over water, but of course that's where the radar is seeing the smoke. Obviously the fire itself is not over the water. There's definitely another one here. This little trail that's trails up to where the Vinton area is definitely smoke too. And we'll kind of look at the weather map now and show you what's going on, because there's not a whole lot that's changing here with this perspective. High pressure east of us is at the surface or ground level. That's why we have these persistent southerly winds. That's not going to change. The high, though, that becomes more consequential in our forecast is the one on the left side of your screen. That's the upper level high pressure system. That's going to cause the air to sink. We're already seeing warmer temperatures in Texas and Oklahoma. The warmest of warm air will stay put over there. We're not going to get into the 90s here in southwest Louisiana, though it's worth noting it's not impossible that we could see some 90s in northern Louisiana later on this weekend and on into next week. But again, not happening here. At least it does not look likely to happen in southwest Louisiana. Tonight, temperatures will be falling back. Should get into the 60s by around 8 o'clock tonight. We'll fall a little bit more from there, but I think most of us stay in the 60s overnight tonight. That gray coloration is fog, and yes, I do think visibility will be a concern overnight tonight into tomorrow morning. It should clear fairly quick. I'd say mid-morning or so, the fog is gone. We'll warm up tomorrow into the upper 70s to near 80-degree range, and we'll do this all over again, likely for the foreseeable future, with very little changing day to day through much of next week. With this upper level high remaining firmly in control of our weather, it may kind of bounce around back and forth over the next several days into next week, but the overall pattern here is going to be unchanged, and that is for us to be warm and humid with little to no chance of rain. Speaking of, please note that every day that goes by without rain, we begin to add to that rainfall deficit, and more than 10 days like we may end up with here can certainly cause some problems. We're not under any burn bans, but just be mindful that hopefully you would exercise caution anytime, even if it was super wet. Fires can still get out of control, but when we're talking about drier than normal conditions, just be mindful. Please be extra cautious if you are doing any burning, especially if you live near or around any wooded areas where such fires could tend to get out of control easier. If you're in an urban environment where the grass is green in your backyard, odds are you're not going to get a fire that could get out of control. But again, let's use some common sense and just be cautious anytime you're doing anything with fire or that could cause a fire to develop. Here's our 10-day forecast. This is what I'm talking about. Very little day-to-day change. Highs in the 80s pretty much every day. And all in all, warm, humid weather with no rain. One way to escape that heat would be out on the water. And yes, if you're headed out of the Gulf, it's obviously going to be cooler. The water temperature, unfortunately, at Cameron has not been working, so I can't show you what that is. But the marine conditions, southwesterly winds 10 to 15 knots tomorrow, seas around 2 feet. A light chop on the inland lakes and bays. As far as hunting and fishing times are concerned, sunrise 7:15, sunset 7:25 tomorrow evening. Best time would be around 3:30 in the afternoon. Good time around 8:30 tomorrow morning. Of course, that is based on the moon, which the moon rises tomorrow morning at 8:37 in the morning. One more check of our 10-day forecast before we wrap things up here. Not a whole lot's going to change day to day. So warm, humid, no rain, no storms to contend with. I'll take us being in a boring weather pattern if it means we don't have any threat of severe weather, which obviously we do not. There's not even a chance of rain in our forecast over the next week to week and a half. I'll be back on television coming up in about 20 minutes or so for 7 News at 6. We'll be back here on Monday here for First Alert Weather Extra at this time, and meteorologist Max Lagano will be along with you tomorrow afternoon and evening on 7 News. Hope you guys have a great weekend, and we'll send you back to your regular programming now here on our streaming devices.